Hi, welcome to the Pursuit of Truth. So, yesterday, the world, as it were, celebrated or commemorated, or whatever the term is, for the 80 years of the D-Day landings. And the world leaders all there. And, they're probably, reflecting or there to say that never again, or, that this was a triumph against evil, or whatever justification they put for one side killing other sides. And I know in the system that we live within, it was something that had to be dealt with, because Hitler was taking the land and the rights away from people and doing all sorts of, obviously we know about the Holocaust and what was done to Jews, gays, gypsies, and etc., and people that weren't, what's the term that he used? The bright-eyed blue blonde. It just escapes my mind. But I get that, that's the thing. I don't know, because I don't know, are we a product of our times, of our beliefs, of our understandings? Are we always doomed? Is if we were living in a better way, where we weren't divided, where we all see each other as human beings, would these sort of things still happen? Would we still need to fight each other? Would we still, because we wouldn't see land as possessed. We would say it is all of ours. So there would be no fighting over land, which I guess was part of Hitler and part of most wars, is fighting over land and the control over that land. The problem is, I guess, even in the world that I would like, where we saw each other as one, and that we didn't have all these borders, and we could go anywhere we liked, and we all lived together, working together as one big unit, freely, without money, without these restrictions, and governments or whoever's in control of us, not in control of us, whoever's shepherding, or whatever the term would be, the planet, so that there could be hospitals, there could be roads, there could be infrastructure, there could be technology that was free for everyone, because everything was free originally. Would we still have these kinds of wars? Would we still have this kind of mindset? Because we're brought into this mindset. We grow up seeing war. We grow up justifying that it's sometimes okay to kill another person if they're doing something bad to you. We get all this kind of, this is patriotism that we're all brought up with, that this is my land and I need to defend it, and I'm better than this person's land, and etc. All these kinds of things that happen, and they happen throughout life. In this box that we put ourselves in, with football teams and TV programs that people argue over, and who's better, Doctor Who or Star Trek. We go down that negative rabbit hole. But if our minds weren't like that, if our minds were open to, oh, look at this great existence that we all have, and that we've been given everything freely, so that we can work together for the propagation of humanity and the earth that we're on. It seems we're too far gone to get to there, I suspect. Anyway, so as they were celebrating that, obviously this is not, there's lots of, if I was in a different time, I could be talking about a different event. This just happens to be the event at the time, and I like to remove the tags. This isn't really about Israel, Gaza and Palestine and all that kind of stuff. This is human beings who have taken on those guises, fighting against each other, and still showing that we haven't moved on from D-Day. We haven't moved on from the Second World War, because we're still fighting each other. Haven't we learned the lesson that what was the benefit of all that? The only thing that happened is that people died. The land was still there, even if names changed or ownership changed. The land was still there, the people were still there. Just what actually happened was there was suffering and depression, monetary or mentally. Mothers, fathers losing their children, people losing their lives, siblings losing their brothers and sisters, people being put through pain, through extermination or gassing or whatever means that people were killed by, whether it was a gun or sword or whatever means. We haven't learned. We're still doing the same thing. We're still justifying the same things. And one side, Orwell's double think, we're saying, yeah, this is bad war, and well done, we fought the evil. But on the other side, it's like, yeah, but this is now, and this is justified to do this. So here there's two from the World Tonight. I think it's Dominic Waghorn is presenting it now for a bit, and the first bit's about white phosphorus being used against international law. Whether that's happening, I don't know, but what I'm talking about is not removing the tax. There's one set of human beings, what we're still doing to each other, but the lessons we're still not learning, the things that are still happening. And it's not just there, because in the next one it's about Amnesty International. They talk about the other things that are happening around the world, Sudan and all those other places where wars are still happening. We're living on a planet that's still fighting each other. Oh my God, are we never going to learn? Is this what we want to choose with our lives, to always be continuing the suffering that we invented and that we want to propagate? Right here now.
Well, welcome back. Israel has been accused of unlawfully dropping white phosphorus over residential buildings in neighbouring Lebanon. A report by Human Rights Watch says that Israeli forces deployed the substance in at least 17 towns since October last year. Once exposed to oxygen, white phosphorus ignites and inflicts serious and sometimes fatal burns. The report's publication comes at a time of increased tensions, with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu warning today that his forces are prepared for what he called strong action in the north. Our special correspondent Alex Crawford has this report.
There's a lot of pressure building on the Lebanese-Israeli border, and it's escalated massively over the past few days. This latest round of Hezbollah attacks is clearly testing tempers, with both sides now threatening all-out war. The Israeli War Cabinet's emergency meeting was quickly followed by the Israeli leader visiting troops and emergency workers in the north. We are ready to strike, he seemed to be suggesting.
Whoever thinks that he will hurt us and we will sit idly by is making a big mistake. We are prepared for a very strong action in the north.
The Israelis have been hitting...
I just want to counter that, yeah? What he really means is that I'm going to sit, and this isn't just about President Benjamin Netanyahu, this is about all world leaders throughout time and probably in the future. He's talking about the fight and this, that and the other, but they aren't going to be doing the fighting, although maybe back in the medieval days the kings and the leaders would sit at the front and maybe would take part in it, but most of them are like Elvis in a cage, to quote the Pink Floyd song. But yeah, these world leaders talking about this strength and this firm. If he was in a fight, he'd probably run away. But it's these world leaders who will say, yeah, we're going to be strong, we're going to do this, that and the other. But it's not them doing it. They're not talking about their own actions. They're talking about other people's children going out and fighting and losing their lives and dying for this person's, the leader's beliefs. This is the wrong thing about the system. This isn't about Israel. It's not about Benjamin Netanyahu. This is about our ideology of the system that we live within, that we have leaders who will send us out to kill each other. For what? For defence, for land. Why can't we get on with each other? And I know, he's in the situation where he's forced into doing this, but what I'm talking about more is not that the whole system is geared in a way that it allows this to take place, that he has to do this. This is the thing, the root cause that we're not getting to solving. We're carrying on. The elastic band, the band-aid to our wound that isn't going to heal is fighting wars. Because we don't see each other as one.
Idly by is making a big mistake. We are prepared for a very strong action in the north.
The Israelis have been hitting further inside Lebanon. If we look again, the pictures are hazy but appear to show white phosphorus being used. The claims come on top of an investigation by Human Rights Watch, which details widespread use of white phosphorus by the Israeli military in Lebanon. The human rights group focused on the months immediately after October the 7th, when these areas were full of residents. The use of white phosphorus to drive out people, burn land, or fired indiscriminately in populated areas is outlawed under international law.
This documentation, I think, should raise the alarms with states that are providing weapons or arms with Israel, because there's a real risk that such arms are going to be used in violation, or may be used in violation of international law. whether it's in Gaza but also in Lebanon.
Our own investigations in Lebanon found evidence of widespread burning of land, although we cannot confirm by whom. When we contacted the IDF, they vehemently denied using white phosphorus illegally, but they said they do possess smokescreen shells that include white phosphorus that are legal under international law. These shells are used by the IDF for creating smoke screens, they said, and not for targeting or causing fires, and are not defined under law as incendiary weapons. But tens of thousands have been forced out of their homes on both sides of the border, 100,000 in Lebanon alone, according to the Foreign Ministry, causing a displacement crisis. Many of them are farmers, like this man, who told us of the scorched earth policy they believe is being used against them.
When the phosphorus is fired, it drops something like powder. It sprays something yellow and it has a bad smell. All our land in the south is affected by it. In the beginning of the war, they dropped a lot of phosphorus.
The many Lebanese residents we've been talking to over several months appear to back up the investigation by Human Rights Watch. We found residents who don't want to be identified in Kefir Keller, who showed us pictures from an attack the night before we arrived. It looks very much like white phosphorus being fired from Israel.
They're trying to suffocate us, start fires and burn all our land. Why do they want to hit us? Why do they want to hit a civilian area? Are they allowed to hit a civilian area?
But the Israeli military insists it's hitting Hezbollah targets from where the Hamas ally is launching attacks against Israel. The villagers we spoke to say these attacks are unpredictable. The fires are difficult to extinguish and they've suffered breathing difficulties. They're one of the few families still in the area, nervous about speaking because of possible Israeli retribution, but also worried about incurring Hezbollah wrath by talking to foreign media. The area was clearly still very active whilst we were there. And now the Arab media is awash with reports of diplomatic warnings from several Western envoys about an imminent Israeli attack on Lebanon. Prepare for war, one is thought to have told the Lebanese. The escalation over the past few days has only fueled those worries of all-out war between the two neighbours. Alex Crawford, Sky News.
This is the thing I say about how we see things, the justification of war. Certain things are allowed under international law. We've wordsmithed it, we've wordspelled it. Because it's written down that you can do this, this and this, that justifies it. That says, yeah, it's okay to do that. And I'm not just talking about that, I'm talking about even conflicts. That's our understanding, that we've written down that we are allowed to do certain things to each other in a certain way for a certain reason. I don't know.
Well, to discuss those disturbing pictures from southern Lebanon and those renewed fears of this conflict expanding across the border into Lebanon, happy to say I'm joined by the Lebanese journalist from Al Arabi TV, Jad Hossein. Jad, thank you for joining us tonight. I mean, how worried are the Lebanese that the rhetoric is intensifying and also, it seems, the exchange of fire across this border?
The fear is there, definitely, since the escalation has been ongoing for months now, without any political solution at hand, at least as far as we know. The Americans had an envoy, which is Amos Hochstein, which is trying to secure some kind of new rules of engagement in the south between Hezbollah and Israel. And until now, there is no clear solution to this problem, as well as the whole ceasefire also in Gaza, which launched this whole escalation in the south. So the fear is there.
I think it's fair to say that as those American and also French efforts to ease the situation in Lebanon happen, they seem to coincide with efforts to bring about some kind of ceasefire deal in Gaza. Is there a possibility of the tensions in southern Lebanon easing without any deal in Gaza, or are the two completely kind of contingent on each other?
Until now, they seem to be contingent, at least in the rhetoric of Hezbollah. But one has to also put in mind the fact that once the conflict in Gaza ends, hopefully, that doesn't mean that directly things would slow down in the Lebanese south, because there is a wing in the Israeli government and the Israeli military which is saying clearly that the situation with Hezbollah is untenable for the Israelis because of the damages that he is incurring inside of Israel. So the last statement of Netanyahu also said that maybe after Rafah, the northern front would be dealt with. So one has to wait and see how the Israelis deal with all of these.
And in terms of what Hezbollah are doing, what do you think their game is? Because they're losing commanders, they're losing a lot of fighters, and yet they seem to be continuing these efforts to attack Israel. It's kind of tit for tat, but they're not relenting at all. What do you think Hezbollah's game is here?
I believe Hezbollah's game, if you take a look at his behavior, isn't dragging Lebanon to an all-out war, it seems, because it had many opportunities to do that. When Israel assassinated the Hamas leader in the southern area of Beirut, or even their leaders, their army commanders, they didn't. So I believe that what they are trying to do is to have new rules of engagement to deter the Israelis from escalating from their end if their efforts in Gaza fail at the end.
And when Benjamin Netanyahu threatens a bigger offensive into Lebanon, is that something that the Lebanese are worried about, or do they see it as bluffing and blustering?
You have to worry about it, because this kind of escalation has been going on for now 8 months, I guess. And you have displaced in Lebanon more than 100,000, and also in Israel. So one has to fear of what might happen. But also this big talk and hard talk between the two has been ongoing for 8 months, and it's part of the negotiations, I believe, that is ongoing indirectly between the two. So one fears maybe a miscommunication, because until now it seems that both sides do not have big interest into an all-out war. Maybe the fragile situation with the Israeli government and Netanyahu trying to stay in power might lead some factions in that government to maybe push for a wider war on their northern front. But until now, these escalations have been calculated, let's say.
The Lebanese are known for their resilience and for their spirit, but I mean, things economically so difficult for the Lebanese, and these very worrying times. Is that all taking its toll on that famous spirit of the Lebanese?
Yeah, sure. It has been taking its toll for the maybe last 5 years. You have more than 350,000 people who left the country since the economic crisis. And you have paralysis in the government. You cannot elect a president. And the situation is dire on all fronts. And maybe it's one of the reasons Hezbollah is being really not very keen on escalating and maybe dragging the country into an all-out war, because he's one of the responsibles, he's one of the leaders in the country, in the government. So they'll be also responsible for the post-war efforts, and you don't have the economic means to restore what could be destructed, and also you would have to deal with lots of social and political problems that would occur after such a war. So maybe that's one of the reasons that the issues are being calculated.
Jad Hassan, thank you so much for your time. Great to get your insights on the worrying situation in Lebanon. It's great to have you on The World. This is The World with me, Dominic Waghorn. After the break.
Also, that's the thing, isn't it? Like that person said in Lebanon when he was showing the videos of phosphorus going over hills, I didn't see any like civilians around look like hills. So they may be using it within the terms that they have agreed. I don't know, but he said, like, why are they doing it to us? You see, that's the thing. It's the civilians that always suffer from what the world leaders or the people in charge, like Hezbollah or Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel, or Joe Biden of America, or Rishi Sunak of the UK, or whoever. They make these decisions, but we suffer the consequences of them. And then, like, this guy's thinking, why is this happening? But he probably still would then back Hezbollah or whatever, or whoever their world is, because we're ground in to see ourselves in that box. Patriotism of the little bit of land that we call our own, well, it's not. And then there's countries like Lebanon, they're starving, and this and the other. And the irony of it, and the irony of the whole world economic system, is that everything was given free to all of us. We're the only ones. We're not, and there's no God pushing down on us, telling us we must do this. We have free will. We could do whatever we want, but we chose a system where we would put a price tag on everything that was originally free for all of us, and caused this problem for ourselves and for each other, so that we can live in a country where you could be starving and poor, but around you, in Lebanon, I'm sure there's enough agriculture, there's enough food, there's enough everything for everyone to be able to live nicely. But the problem is, because of economy, they have to buy it from somewhere else. Same as like here, when we have oil fields in the North Sea that you could get gas from, but it's too expensive to do that. It's cheaper to buy it from somewhere else, and therefore you become dependent. And that's this whole stupidity of ourselves. We have everything. Everyone could live nicely, but we choose to live a system that allows that not to happen more often than not. Here's the next one.
Welcome back. Well, Sky News has analysed and verified a fragment of a US-made bomb at the site where a school was struck by the Israeli military earlier today. 40 people, including women and children, were killed in the operation. Today I spoke to the Secretary-General of Amnesty International, Agnes Kalamar, who told me that Israel has no red lines.
A fundamental, cardinal principle of international law is a distinction between civilians and military targets. A second principle is that you warn civilians before pursuing an attack which may harm them. From what I understand, from what I have read coming from the UN, they were not warned. Civilians were not warned that the Israelis were about to launch a strike. We need an international investigation run by UN agencies, run by the International Criminal Court. That is what Amnesty International has been asking for as long as 8 months. The problem right now is that there are no one in Gaza able to carry out those investigations except some media workers who are there and people working for Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch and the UN. But we need the space to carry out those international investigations.
What the Israelis would say is, of course, is that they investigate their own incidents. They also say in this particular incident that Hamas was kind of embedded amongst the civilians in this school and were a threat to their soldiers nearby. I mean, it's very hard for Israel, isn't it, to attack an enemy like this that is deliberately embedding itself and hiding itself amongst the civilian population.
There is no doubt it's very hard. There is no doubt it's very hard to attack such a small territories with such a density of population, a territory that has been under military occupation and a territory that has been under siege for decades. The problem right now is that in the way Israel is pursuing its military campaign, it has transformed a military campaign against Hamas into a collective punishment of the Palestinians. It looks as if every Palestinian, man, woman and children, has become a lawful target simply because they are near in the vicinity of Hamas. This is a complete violation of every principle that was enacted in 1948.
But aren't Hamas using those principles of international law to become almost sort of invulnerable? If they do hide themselves amongst the civilian population, and it's against the international law, as you see it, to go after them there, it's impossible for Israel then to go in after them and to get the hostages back. What are they meant to do?
What are they meant to do? Find other ways.
What would you recommend? What would be your advice to the Israelis?
It's not for me to tell what they have to do. It is for me to say what they should not do. And what they should not do is deliberately or indiscriminately or disproportionately targeting civilians. What they should not do is committing crimes which, according to the International Court of Justice, is coming very close to amount to genocide. Are you going to go ahead in the name of targeting Hamas? Are you prepared to commit genocide? That is a question that we need to ask, because right now, everything that the Israeli authorities are doing indicate that they have no red lines. Yes, Hamas is a lawful target, but not at all cost.
What about
Not
Hamas?
at all cost. Hamas has its own responsibility, and we are calling for them to be held to account, including through the International Criminal Court. The prosecutor has issued the demand for an arrest warrant. I hope that they will be granted so that those Hamas leaders and indeed the Israeli leaders can be held to account.
What do you say to Israelis who would say that if they follow your advice and your interpretation of international law, which is different to theirs, they will never get their hostages back and they won't be able to destroy Hamas, who carried out this appalling day of atrocities on October the 7th, the worst loss of Jewish life since the Second World War, which, as you say, we are commemorating today?
Absolutely. First and foremost, we need, and we acknowledge at Amnesty International, that what was committed on October 7 was horrific. It amounted to war crimes and possible crimes against humanity. There is no doubt. And those responsible for planning it and perpetrating it must be held to account. Point number one. Point number two, though, the campaign of retaliation in response to what happened on October 7 cannot become, let me repeat it, cannot become a campaign of collective punishment for every Palestinian people. There are limitations. Would you agree, though, that what Hamas did on October the 7th and what they've done since, and the conditions they've held these hostages in, is in a completely different league in terms of human rights breaches to what Israel is doing in self-defense now? No, I will not agree. First of all, I'm not comparing. Second of all, absolutely, Hamas committed war crimes, possible crimes against humanity. According to the prosecutor, they have committed crimes against humanity. The holding of hostages is absolutely in violation of international law. Amnesty International and others are calling for the unconditional release of the hostages. The best way to get there is through a ceasefire.
There is a hope, obviously, at the moment that we will be moving on from the military phase of this to a more political direction, and there is some hope for some progress towards a diplomatic solution to the conflict. America, though, seems to think that Israel is not crossing any red lines in Rafah. What do you make of the way America, but also its ally Britain, is dealing with this diplomatically? Are they doing enough to put enough pressure on both parties to this conflict to bring about some negotiated end to it?
Well, absolutely not. We believe that the United States hold a very large part of responsibility in the fact that this, very cruel war has been going on for 8 months. The United States has failed to denounce Israel's multiple violation of international law, which, by the way, is not just my interpretation. The United States has used its veto to prevent any kind of ceasefire at the Security Council. The United States is continuing to arm Israel against, every logical steps. If you want to stop violation, then you stop arming. The United States is not putting clear red lines in the sand. The United States has failed the Israeli people, has failed the Palestinian people, and currently is failing the entire world because it is breaking down the rule-based order.
Has the ICC is now indicting or wants to arrest Benjamin Netanyahu, but also the Hamas leaders. In your mind, is Prime Minister Netanyahu a war criminal?
Yes, absolutely. We at Amnesty International have been monitoring the situation for many decades, and I can assure you the war crimes are piling up and piling up. And they also include war crimes from Hamas, there is no doubt. But the Israeli authorities have committed many war crimes, and according to us, they also have committed the crimes against humanity of apartheid.
The danger, though, isn't it, is that the ICC's warrant has led to a huge amount of criticism of the ICC. Isn't there a danger, though, that the ICC is marginalised because of what it's done? Has it not overreached? Has its prosecutors overreached in their decision?
Absolutely not. It has made the ICC absolutely relevant and central to what is happening. It has made accountability central to that crisis,
Well,
where
not really.
everyone else
But if America's
wanted,
ignoring it, if Britain chooses to ignore it, those are two hugely important powers.
I agree, but
that
there are
weakens
others.
it, doesn't it? Doesn't it undermine the ICC?
Well, no, the United States has not even ratified the International Criminal Court statute. So, what's new? What's new? This country is not upholding a formidable instrument for the delivery of justice. There is nothing new there. They are only pursuing an approach which suits their interest at the moment.
Just moving on from the Gaza conflict, more broadly speaking, we're seeing today, we're commemorating the triumph of freedom over tyranny, but we're seeing authoritarians across the world on the march in the ascendancy. How concerned are you about what that means for human rights globally and also the risk of much more global conflict?
We are witnessing a multiplication of those practices everywhere, from Russia to Asia, from China to Burkina Faso. So absolutely, we are at a critical juncture as an international community. We have right now a conflict in Gaza that is spiraling and threatening, of course, Palestinians and Israelis, but also the entire rule-based order. But we have so many other conflicts in Sudan, in Myanmar, in the Democratic Republic of Congo that are completely ignored, even though the violations are huge. We have authoritarian leaders prepared to continue their rules and violate basic freedoms. We believe that this is as close to the abyss as we have ever been. And this is why when we have the International Court of Justice doing the right thing, when we have the International Criminal Court prosecutor doing the right thing, when we have civil society saying, no, let's hold on, let's uphold the rule of law, that is hope. That principle of 1948, the principle enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the notion that we are all born free and equal just because we are human, that's what we need to fight for against those leaders.
Agnes Callamard there from Amnesty International. Well, some breaking news in the last few minutes. The President of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa, has said...
And then there came this one, I was going to tack on, it was about they found Israel and IDF managed to get 4 hostages out. And in this case, I sort of feel like, well, and that argument on the world was very good actually, because it sort of suggested that, well, what are they meant to do if Hamas are putting themselves purposely inside civilians? Of course, this doesn't justify killing civilians, but it certainly makes it more difficult. But now, when you have to, if you knew, like this in this case, that 4 of your people, you know where they are, you're trying to plan for some time to get them out, but they're in a refugee camp. How do you minimise or avoid completely killing of people that Hamas have put as human shields around them, as it were? I mean, obviously snipers would be the best if you had snipers that could just take out the people and then go in, but I suspect it's a lot more difficult than that. But for this case, I sort of feel that, well, they managed to actually get their people back. But it is like it's a really messy situation, isn't it? Like worse than Vietnam, I guess, because of the dense population. But yeah, here's this now. I missed the beginning of this, but it's the doctor talking.
I believe that we are ready for these types of surprises, and I'm praying together with the rest of the Israeli nation, and I think with the whole world, for the return of the captives that are still in captivity. We are ready to receive them and looking forward for their return. Thank you very much.
Well, that was the doctor who tended to the 4 Israeli hostages who have been rescued in that raid in Gaza by the Israeli military, special forces and police in a joint operation. These are the pictures of those hostages. Noah Argamani in the top left, 25 years old, Almog Mirjan of 21, Andrei Kozlov, 27 years old, and Shlomi Ziv, who is 40 years old. They were all kidnapped on the Hamas attacks on October the 7th. They were at the Nova Music Festival, and you might recognize Noah Argamani, the young woman who, those pictures were often repeated of her on the back of a motorbike being taken away. Sky News spoke to her father several times after her kidnapping. He often spoke of how he just wanted his daughter to be returned. He didn't want war. He wants the safe return of his daughter. And today we saw those images of their reunion on board that helicopter. Noah and her father embracing. Let's just take a look and pause. It's that brief moment where they look into each other's eyes and hug after 8 months of separation, of course. Now, we also heard earlier from Daniel Hagari, the IDF spokesperson, Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari, of course. He said that this was a complex operation. He said that they were aware of the hostage location for quite a while. I think he said a number of weeks, if I recall rightly. And he said that they had been working on picking the right time to rescue the hostages. Simultaneously, we have now heard from the Gaza government media office, run of course by Hamas, that control Gaza. They said that 94 people, 94 Palestinians have been killed in the same area, in the Nusrat refugee camp and surrounding areas, following those operations. These pictures coming into us from the Al-Aqsa hospital in Gaza, where a number of the dead and injured were taken. You can see the scenes of chaos as presumably they fear Israeli airstrikes. Now, we are told that a number of those people killed, the 94 Palestinians we're being told, who have been killed in the Nusrat refugee camp and the surrounding areas, were killed in Israeli airstrikes, according to the Gaza government media office. One special forces officer has also been killed. We are now also have some new pictures that have just been released by the IDF. Let's bring you those. Look, it shows the moment 3 of the hostages were taken out of Gaza in a helicopter, we're being told. So these pictures coming into us from the Israeli military, the black and white images showing drone images, presumably, of the helicopter and the special forces as they took 3 of the hostages in that raid from inside Gaza to safety, to Tel Aviv, where we have just heard from the doctor who tended to them on their release. And we were told that all 4 hostages are in a good condition. Let's remind you, Noah Argamani, Almog Merjan, Andrei Kozlov and Shlomi Ziv, all 4 have been released and in that rescue operation, taken to Tel Aviv, where they have been tended to by a doctor, and they are said to be in a good condition, which of course is the situation with all the hostages that have been rescued so far, or released in those brief pauses and deals between Hamas and Israel, and calls, of course, for a ceasefire deal to be accepted. Well, Prime Minister Netanyahu also met one of the hostages at the hospital in Tel Aviv this afternoon. These pictures have come into us at Sky News. And of course, these are the pictures you can see there. The young woman in black, Noah Argamani, all smiles, and her father there. Sky News has spoken to her father several times since her kidnapping, and you can see Prime Minister Netanyahu embracing Noah Argamani and her family. Let's take you back to the Élysée Palace in Paris, where President Joe Biden has been speaking. Let's bring you what he had to say.
But before I begin my remarks, I want to echo President Macron's comments welcoming the safe rescue of 4 hostages that were returned to their families in Israel. We won't stop working until all the hostages come home and a ceasefire is reached. That is essential to happen. You know, together we marked the 8th anniversary of the Allied operation that saved Europe and incredible heroes who carried it out. I found it 180 brave men, happened to be all men at the time, who came back to Normandy this week with such pride and sense of devotion. I don't think anyone who got to meet them, shake their hands, or hear their stories will ever forget their stories, or the look in their eyes and the pride they took with what they did. But you could also see them remembering the lost comrades at the same time. You know, the fact is that I know I won't forget it. I want to thank President Macron, Mr. Macron, for the people of France for making our heroes feel so welcome, because they did feel welcome. You could feel it, you could see it. And we'll never forget what they did. And this week we have showed the world once again the power of allies and what we can achieve when we stand together. That's what this relationship between France and the United States exemplifies. You know, we see it in Ukraine, where our 2 countries are standing with the Ukrainian people as they fight off Putin's brutal aggression. And yesterday I announced $225 million in new security assistance to Ukraine, and it's the 6th package we've provided since we signed the national security legislation earlier this year. I wish we could have done it when we wanted to 6 months earlier, but we got it done. With $61 billion in additional aid to Ukraine. And I commend France and our European allies for their leadership as well. The EU has provided over $107 billion in assistance to Ukraine since the war began, because we know what happens if Putin succeeds in subjugating Ukraine. And we won't stop, you know, Putin's not going to stop at Ukraine. It's not just Ukraine, it's about much more than Ukraine. All of Europe will be threatened. We're not going to let that happen. The United States is standing strong with Ukraine, we're standing with our allies, and we're standing with France. We will not, say it again, walk away. And around the world, France and the United States are working together to strengthen security and shared prosperity. In the Indo-Pacific, we stand together for freedom of navigation, transparent governments, as well as fair economic practices. In the Middle East, in North Africa, we work together on issues critical to peace and stability, like food security and counterterrorism. And the existential threat of climate change, which is just growing greater. We're working together to accelerate the global transition to net zero. It is the existential threat to humanity, among the only existential threat to humanity, including nuclear weapons, is if we do nothing on climate change. I could go on. Every day, the French people and the American people are connected in countless ways through economic ties, collaboration, and science.
Good evening. Tears of joy and sorrow for the families of 4 hostages rescued alive from Gaza in the biggest operation of its kind since the war began 8 months ago. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said his forces had acted with creativity and boldness, but Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas has accused Israel of a bloody massacre with hundreds left dead and injured in the aftermath. And tonight, Hamas has claimed more hostages were killed during the rescue operation. The Israeli forces rescued the hostages from 2 houses in Al-Nusrat, an area in central Gaza, in an operation which had been planned for months but delayed several times. According to health officials at the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Hospital, at least 210 Palestinians were killed, with a further 400 injured, making it one of the bloodiest attacks since the beginning of the war. The hostages were taken to a medical facility in Tel Aviv, where they were reunited with their families. Our international correspondent, Alex Rossi, reports from Israel.
It is a moment the families feared they'd never see. After 8 months in captivity, Noah Argamani is reunited with her father. The emotion is overwhelming. It contrasts sharply with the last time he saw her alive. These distressing images show how she was abducted, taken hostage on October the 7th. The 25-year-old was kidnapped along with Almog Maya, Andrei Kozlov and Shlomi Ziv from the Nova Music Festival, which was taking place next to the border with Gaza. All of them have now been taken to this medical center in Tel Aviv. Here they were reunited and connected with loved ones for the first time. For the families, their sudden and dramatic release after 246 days is miraculous.
I am in euphoria, in such a euphoria.
You can't believe this has happened.
I can't believe this has happened. Yes, yes. Thank God. Thank to our soldiers.
At the medical center, the hostages met with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who welcomed them home. For him, this is rare good news.
We're committed to getting the release of all the hostages, and we expect Hamas to release them all. But if they don't, we'll do whatever it takes to get them all back home.
Across Israel, there has been national celebration when lifeguards announced over tannoy to beachgoers that the 4 hostages had been rescued. There were cheers and applause. The released hostages will remain here at the hospital under observation for the time being. But despite the celebration across the country, the focus now in Israel is on the 120 hostages that still remain inside Gaza. The chances of carrying out another daring mission are slim. This IDF footage shows the hostages being guided by troops to a waiting helicopter before it takes off. Hamas's military wing claims hostages were killed in the rescue. Israel's military hasn't commented on that. They described it as a highly complex operation.
Based on precise intelligence conducted in daylight in 2 separate buildings deep inside Gaza. While under fire inside the buildings, under fire on the way out from Gaza, our forces rescued our hostages.
And in Gaza, it is clear civilians have paid a heavy price for the release of the hostages. Hundreds killed and injured during the operation. At the hospitals that are still functioning, there's chaos and fear. The stream of wounded just keeps on coming. The pain and suffering relentless. The international outrage over the war in Gaza will continue to grow as the bloodshed shows no sign of stopping. But Israel's government will see the release of the hostages as vindication that the strategy in Gaza is working. Alex Rossi, Sky News, Tel Aviv.
Let's take you live to Tel Aviv now, where police have moved in. That's following protests in the centre of the city. As you can see, people being arrested. And these protests have been going on for some months, mainly protesting to bring about the return of all the hostages. Many critical of Benjamin Netanyahu. But you see there the very strong police presence at that protest this evening in Tel Aviv. All pressure has been growing on Benjamin Netanyahu at home and abroad to find a way to bring the hostages home. A lot of that pressure has been applied by the United States, with President Biden reiterating his 3-stage plan to end the war. Well, let's cross now to Washington, D.C., and our US correspondent, Mark Stone. And Mark, I believe there have also been protests in Washington, D.C.
Yes, we're in Lafayette Square, just to the north of the White House. If I step out of the way, you can see the White House there. President Biden, of course, not home. He is in France at the moment, following the D-Day commemorations, but what we have seen through the course of the day is a snake of protesters trying to encircle the White House. A large barricade has been set up in front of the fencing that is always at the front of the White House, a barricade to keep the protesters back. But as we pan the camera to the left, you can see the back end now of a long chain of protesters that has gone right away around the perimeter of the White House building itself. They were here earlier on in Lafayette Square, and you can see the pedestal to the statue here of President Jackson, Free Gaza, graffiti here and on other statues as well. I have to say, I've been covering these protests for some time around America, and this feels to me to be the biggest one yet. The protests so far have been largely confined to college campuses. This one has not. This one has come right to President Biden's front door. It is a doorstep reminder to the president, although he is not here, that they feel he is complicit in what they are calling a genocide in Gaza. I have to say, too, that the latest images that are coming out, and I suppose the other side of the story, that in Israel is one of jubilation that 4 hostages have been released. The other side of that story is the cost. And the images that we have been looking at as we put together our report, which you will see in an hour, are utterly horrific. The reporting from the hospitals that our local teams have spoken to suggests that more than 200 people are dead in the area around where the Israelis moved in to rescue their hostages. That is the cost in terms of Palestinian life. I was talking earlier on to the IDF, to a spokesperson from the IDF, who admitted that yes, Palestinians had died. He didn't tell me or didn't know the breakdown of Hamas-affiliated deaths and civilians. But what I can tell you, having looked at the imagery, is there are many children among those that have died today in the attempt, or the successful attempt as it was, by Israel to get its hostages, 4 of its hostages, out. The IDF spokesman said to me that yes, civilians had died, but they had died in the crossfire, and he placed the blame firmly on Hamas for hiding their captives among civilians. But certainly I'll leave you with the shot of the White House, as you can see the back end of a very large protest here in Washington, D.C.
Okay, Mark, thank you.
Far beyond the jubilation of a rare Israeli hostage extraction is the cost on the ground in Gaza. The images that our team has filmed are among the worst from the last 8 months of war. The injured are everywhere, and they are of every age. Survivors, some barely alive. Look here on the right, still breathing, just. This is the now dysfunctional Al-Aqsa hospital, the closest to the location of the hostage raid. And it is a scene of utterly helpless chaos. The area where the hostages were held, where the daytime raid took place, is just over 2 miles away. We cannot be sure how many Palestinians died, but the pictures tell the most horrific story. Dozens dead, all around. Children in pieces. The Israeli military is not denying that there were Palestinian casualties. They were caught in the crossfire, we're told, as the special forces moved in and moved out again with the hostages. Their deaths, say Israel, are on Hamas for hiding their captives among civilians. By late afternoon, the Palestinian hospital spokesman said the number dead was over 200.
The Israeli army committed an ugly massacre in central Gaza, particularly in the Nuseirat camp. More than 210 people were killed and at least 400 injured, including children, women and the elderly.
So what now for President Biden's peace plan? He's in France this weekend with nothing on the civilian cost.
I want to echo President Macron's comments welcoming the safe rescue of 4 hostages that were returned to their families in Israel. We won't stop working until all the hostages come home and a ceasefire is reached. That is essential to happen.
At the White House, a huge weekend pro-Palestinian protest. Biden's doorstep reminder that he faces huge pressure from every side.
President Biden has always said that getting hostages back was one of his top priorities, but then so too was protecting civilians. That so many have died undermines his strategy. It damages him, and goodness knows where it leaves prospects for peace.
And despite protests in Israel too, Netanyahu may see his success, hostages home, as proof that force is a means to an end. One consequence of the rescue was that his rival Benny Gantz, who had threatened to collapse the government this weekend over disagreements on Gaza, well, he did not resign. The government in Israel, whose policy is to continue the war, remains intact. Prospects for a ceasefire soon in pieces. Mark Stone, Sky News in Washington.
Well, I haven't seen that piece that he was talking about yet, but if I get it, I'll stick on the end of this. If not, then this will be the end of it. Well, I'll stick it before this actually, so I'm probably talking about it now, even though just the way I edit it, isn't it? Because I haven't seen it yet. So yeah, it's a very difficult situation, but if they used a jet to fire bombs, you know, at a building, I thought it was a refugee camp, but if it was a building, then that made it so bad. But maybe the people that have been killed, the children they're talking about, are members of the families of Hamas fighters, and therefore I guess it could, well, why would they bring their own family to them if they are holding hostages there? Why would they bring civilians there? That's not a normal, well, it's against international law. But yeah, maybe it wouldn't have been better to use snipers, but I guess they did use snipers, but they probably used a plane first, a helicopter first to launch missiles, but obviously that would have been indiscriminate in its attack, whereas a gun would have been more appropriate, I guess. But I don't know, I guess this is a grey area. It's a difficult one because they managed to get their people. This wasn't about, you know, just fighting, as it were. This was about getting their hostages, which, you know, a lot of it hasn't been about. And obviously Hamas are bringing civilians, or maybe their own families with them, supporters with them, to get killed, maybe in the hope that their deaths, they would see as martyrs, is helping their cause, because they know the international community will be worried about the children that are getting killed and the innocent civilians. The problem is we never get a figure of how many of these are Hamas or Hamas supporters and how many are civilians, and that breakdown, because I guess it's difficult because they don't wear uniforms, so it's like guerrilla warfare, isn't it, really? It's a very difficult situation, but yeah, it would have been better if it was more like an SAS type thing, where they didn't use missiles and they just went in with guns and they went in and shot people as they went on. But the problem is, how would they know, you know, if you ever played that Robocop computer game where you had to only kill the target and not the civilian? How do you know who's the civilian, who's the target? Oh, I suppose if they've got a gun, like in that, then you shoot them if they don't, but then they scream out and tell other people. So I don't know, I know, like, I'm not condoning it, but I guess it's a difficult situation that they've been put in. Well, I don't know if there would have been a better way or not. Well, I suppose the better way would have been to take President Biden's week-old end of the war ceasefire plan and then hope that Hamas would actually give them up, but would they? And also in this strike, if they've killed more than the 4 that they saved, which of course would be the problem, is if you use missiles from up in the air to a building where you didn't know where people were, that is obviously the danger. But if I get that piece, I will stick it in before this. But if okay, so don't, that's the end of it now. And what's your views of this? These are my current views. They change, they ebb and flow. You know, it's a very difficult situation we've been put in to witness this. Alright, take it easy. God bless and peace.